On today's show, the preseason starts next Saturday, and the injuries are starting to mount. The Buccaneers have what it takes to rally without Baker Mayfield. I'll discuss next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show online. It's at bucsreport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Bucs Report podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give it a 5-star rating, leave some comments, and tell your friends. I sure would appreciate it. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, the first preseason game is next Saturday. Can you believe it? We're already at that point of the summer, and before all of the injuries that took place, I was feeling, pretty optimistic. But if you want to talk about worst case scenario, Baker Mayfield is facing an injury, a hand contusion, if you will. Do the Buccaneers have what it takes to rally without him in the mix? I'll talk about that a bit later. I'll talk about a player that has been an absolute game changer for the Bucs already. Emeka Egbuka is that guy already. A guy that was drafted here at the most recent draft, and some questions by Bucs fans that why are they drafting a wide receiver? Well, as it turns out, Emeka Egbuka, he is that guy already. A bit later, we'll talk about Baker Mayfield and the hand watch and Trask's moment, as I do know that there are Bucs fans out there that are a part of Team Trask, that if he's just given his opportunity, he's absolutely going to kill it. I don't think it'll come to that. We might see him get some action. And to close out the show, I will talk about Camp Day 9, Buckyball, OL Shuffle, and a tough goodbye. But let's just dive into segment number 1 here. And before I get going here, the preseason is starting next Saturday. A lot of questions, a lot of injuries. And I don't want to revisit too much of the past, but you think about when Jensen got injured all those years ago and how that changed the trajectory of that particular season. The good thing, I guess I'm going to say about Baker Mayfield is what it said is a hand contusion. So if he is missing time, he should not miss too much time. I'll talk about that a bit later in the show, but let's just start with Emeka Egbuka. And man, oh man, is he the guy already? And not always the case. Oftentimes players are drafted, and sometimes it takes a couple seasons before they hit their stride. And to be clear here, he has not played a single game of the regular season in the NFL, so everything could change. But if he is just a glimpse, a glimmer of what we've seen so far, color me optimistic about this whole situation. If you take a look at it, first, it was that leaping grab in the back of the end zone. A lot of this footage is available on the Bucs website. Then it was a toe tag drag touchdown in the corner. And every single day since, this kid has done something else to turn heads. And, it's not just him. I'll talk about here in a minute about Baker Mayfield, the quarterback, him singing the praises of Emeka Egbuka. And, the good thing for me is that we know it's Godwin. We know that it's Evans. But what do we know for sure? That Godwin is injured right now, and Evans is prone to being injured as well. That I think the Buccaneers are in a good position, if you can believe it, even without Godwin going to start the season for this team. And Emeka Egbuka figures to be a big part of that mix. Now, he's showing up in ways we didn't expect. Honestly, didn't expect so soon. I knew he was talented. We just didn't know he was already this polished already. Again, if you haven't checked it out, if you're listening or watching this podcast, no doubt check out the Buccaneers on Bucs.com or whatever the case is. The guy is killing it. And Baker Mayfield as well, before this hand injury, even said, quote, "You can put Emeka anywhere." And that's not normal rookie talk, guys. That's Godwin level trust, and that is big and exactly what the Buccaneers need to do to keep winning. 4 winning NFC South championships, trying to make it season 5, that I think you can book it right now, that Emeka Egbuka figures to be a big part of that puzzle, if you will. And speaking of Godwin, of course, we know that when he is not injured, he is one of the best to do it. There is no doubt. And I might be saying that with creamsicle colored glasses on, but he is a game changer when he's not injured. But even Godwin himself is mentioning Egbuka like a big brother. They're side by side every practice. He's teaching him blocking technique, life stuff. And man, that's got to warm your heart if you are a Bucs fan, is you are starting to see that page turn ever so slowly as the next wave of Bucs will be joining this team. And, he's a huge dude, 6'1", 205, just like Godwin. And you see it in the way he runs routes. Mike Evans, the man, the GOAT, wide receiver, if you will, for the Buccaneers. He said, quote, "He catches like Godwin, looks like a running back." Quite an accomplishment, quite praise heaped on him by Mike Evans. And he's all of that. And I am so excited for the start of the Buccaneers season. And I know that there's the preseason and you can't read too much into that, but you kind of can because you know about the key injuries and the key departures, if you will, that won't be here based on injury. So, the depth is going to have to rise up and be ready for what is to come. I mean, you take a look at Baker Mayfield, it appears that it's going to be okay. A hand contusion, a bit ambiguous, if you will. But if you're asking me, I think that he might just be okay. So let's pause here for a second. Do we need Chris Godwin rushing back now? That's the big takeaways, right? Egbuka might open the season as wide receiver number 2. Of course, with Godwin injured right now, it would only stand to reason as that is the case. But if you take a look at the injuries, so let's just talk about the wide receiver room here. We got Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan, Tez Johnson, Cameron Johnson, who is questionable, Godwin out, Sterling Shepard, Ryan Miller, and Dennis Houston. Another player who grew and surprised me in a big way last season was Jalen McMillan. I expect him to take big steps forward as well. But already exciting, that what this team has been able to put up and, still continues to get it done, right? I think that's the biggest thing is, winning the Super Bowl. And, people thought that this team was going to kind of just flail its way in the aftermath. They won 4 NFC South titles, going to try make it 5 this year, that there has been no leg, no limp, anything with this team minus Tom Brady. Brady took this team over the top to win their second Super Bowl, but I think that Baker Mayfield has that within his skill set, and no doubt is going to be able to do it with guys like Emeka Egbuka, Jalen McMillan, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin at some point. And I'll talk a little bit later about the Wirfs injury. That is kind of one of those things that you didn't plan for. You can never really plan for injuries, but Wirfs not being in the mix is going to be a huge absence. But all things considered, the additions, Emeka Egbuka continues to surprise me each and every time I see him out on the field. Expect him to be a huge, huge piece in next season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the dreaded topic itself. Baker Mayfield injured. Set the alarms. Woo, woo, woo. It's going off. Should we be panicked, or is this Kyle Trask's time to shine? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. The best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Bucs Report on YouTube and leave some comments down below. Let's really blow up the channel. So let's dive into segment number 2 here. And something I don't want to talk about, I really don't, is Baker Mayfield injured, hand contusion. Now, I have a wife who is a nurse, and I said, tell me a little bit about a hand contusion. And she said, well, that's a bit vague. That could mean a lot of different things, but it doesn't sound, in layman's terms, it sounds like a bruise to your hand. I guess there's varying levels of severity, but not optimal timing as the preseason is starting Saturday. The thing that we know, it's the preseason. I wouldn't have expected Baker Mayfield to get a lot of reps in anyway. You start to see them in the final games before the start of the regular season, but there's little to no reason to risk any more injury to a player like Baker Mayfield in these preseason games. What are some of the things that we know about Mayfield? He is a baller. He is not the kind of person that is going to have any kind of setback and let that overtake him. I think he will be okay by the first game of the regular season. And if it's limited in the preseason, I am okay with that. So let's talk about that in segment 2 here. And you may have heard Baker Mayfield has a contusion on his throwing hand. And I know, here we go again, but to be clear here, I was being a little bit over the top. Let's not hit the panic button. Bowles said it's day-to-day, no brace, no wrap, just rest. And in a lot of ways, this is a good opportunity to see what Trask has in the tank. It's really hard. I also cover a hockey team as well, and we talk about backup goalies, and they get more action than backup quarterbacks. Generally speaking, for a quote-unquote backup quarterback to go in there, either has to be an injury or the starting quarterback is just some sort of awful. That has not been the case. But what we know for certain is that Mayfield sat out Friday and Saturday. But the thing of it is he really doesn't have a lot to prove. He's got that vet resume, right? 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 71% completions rate last year. And, that's the thing. I circle back to that. There is no reason to risk him in August. And why? Well, we know why. We saw what can happen and how things can go off the rails. That said, this gives us a chance to see Kyle Trask with the ones, the starters, ostensibly, and see what he has in the tank. Because if you can rewind time just a little bit, I know time flies. I did the Bucs Minute Cast. That's still an active podcast. I've been doing that 4 seasons. This will be going into the 5th season, and I've done this Bucs Report podcast for a couple seasons as well, and time flies. And I remember Trask, and there was Team Trask, there was Team Mayfield. And for me, there was never really any competition. That's just to make both of those quarterbacks feel like they're important. But a good opportunity for Trask to prove to everyone what he truly has out there, albeit not regular season games. It is still a chance to see him under the preseason big lights. And the big thing about Kyle Trask is we don't have to wonder too much. Because what did he do? He delivered, hit Jalen McMillan, hit Mike Evans, no picks. Todd Bowles said, quote, best he's looked in camp, unquote. That's real, praise by your coach, Todd Bowles there. And, when you take a look at it, it's good that they have a guy like Trask. We just don't really know what kind of quarterback he is. Now, say it was worse than that. I don't even want to talk about that, but say that it was. How would this team fare, and what would the predictions or the trajectory of this team be going into next season? That's a tough thing because, listen here, I know people are mixed on Trask. He hasn't done much in 2 years, but now he's got a shot to show he's more than a clipboard holder, and with Michael Pratt still out. So, a lot of things to consider in the quarterback room about, who is going to be the guy. Michael Pratt here as well is out. Baker Mayfield, questionable. Trask, most likely starting. Pratt out, and Connor Basilick, he is the fourth string. So when you take a look historically on this team, that they've had some pretty good options. Gabbert, you remember from years ago that if, what really hit the fan, that you had a good option. A bit of unproven commodities, and I'll talk about that a bit later in the show, that the Buccaneers might actually try to bring in another arm as just kind of a worst case scenario. You don't want Basilick and Trask taking those reps, especially with 2 more weeks until the Titans game. Bucs brought in Jordan McLeod, didn't sign him, but Bowles confirmed another arm is coming. How is that going to manifest itself? Is that going to be a young gun? Is that going to be a snarled old veteran? When you take a look at it, someone that can play, if in a matter of fact, Baker Mayfield isn't good to go. And it's not that I don't have faith in Trask. It's just, the football season compared to other professional sports is a long one. And I don't want the season to be over before it even starts. So Baker's sore hand may be a blessing in disguise. Better to rest him now than limp into September. And here, that is my thoughts on the whole thing, as well as, if it was going to happen. Of course, we hope that it would never happen, right? But if it did have to happen at a time, that this is the time to happen. So we're hoping that all is well with Baker Mayfield, at least by, I'm going to say, maybe, I guess what I'm going to say is if he could get one preseason game in a limited capacity, maybe like the last preseason game, then I think he's good to go. The guy's a baller. He's a competitor, and I never doubt his compete level. It's just not an ideal situation. All right, so coming up here after the break in segment 3 here, we're going to talk about Camp Day 9, Bucky Ball, OL Shuffle, and a tough goodbye. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. Thank you so much for joining me today. So in segment 3 here, we're going to talk about what is next here. We're talking Bucky Ball and what is next for the Bucs. So let's close with day 9 of camp. There was a little bit of everything. First, shortened practice again. They wrapped early, second day straight. What is said is likely due to mounting injuries. No Baker, no Levante, no Cade Otton, no Trey Palmer, no Pratt. Breathe here, Dan. That list is getting long. So let's talk about Bucky Irving, beast mode Bucky. I am so excited to see what he has in the tank going into next season. Is going to be RB1. Right. And that, that there were questions in previous years about, which guy is going to be number 1, Rachaad White. Suffices to say it's Bucky's show. Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, Josh Williams are your respective candidates or options, shall we say. But let's talk about Bucky, a guy that really took the Buccaneers by storm last season, just took that job right away from Rachaad White, and deserving. Crowd went nuts when Trask hit him deep down the sideline, corner and safety all over him, but Bucky brought it down. Bucky, chants from the fans. Best moment of the camp so far. And when you watched it, if it didn't get your blood just pumping, watching him play out there, I don't know what will. Now, look, this kid isn't just a scat back. He can line up out wide. He's electric. And if Rachaad White needs a breather this year, you know who's coming in. And I don't even think it's going to be that. It is going to be Bucky at number 1. And if Bucky needs a breather, he can come in. Now, and I'm not here to cast shade on Rachaad White. He's just, in life, there's winners and losers, and Bucky's just the better guy. And also talking about the O-line shuffle, Graham Barton at left tackle, Bredesen at center, Elijah Klein inside. Bowles said it was an emergency prep. Pray it never happens, he said, but they're thinking ahead, and that is just smart. And, it's good to get some, different looks at different players and how all of that shakes out. One tough bit of news here is rookie edge rusher David Walker is done for the year. torn ACL, that is brutal. As the injuries are starting to mount for this team. He had a real shot to be a part of that second rotation behind Reddick and Diaby, and now Chris Braswell and Anthony Nelson to step up. Also, the Bucs made it official, placed Walker on the IR, signed former Rams wide receiver Jacob Harris to add depth. Big body, 6'5", local kid from Palm Harbor. Now, the competition is fierce. 13 wide receivers on the roster, only 6 make the final 53. And for me, the wide receiver room, we know who it's going to be. I mean, there's going to be options there, but I think that ultimately we know who it's going to be. So, yeah, it's heating up. This is still the deepest position group at camp. And do not forget, the Bucs preseason opener is next week. So there's a lot to be excited about as it all gets real for the Buccaneers real soon here next weekend. So when you take a look at it, the Buccaneers have some injuries. Can they overcome? That is the real question there. All things considered, I do think they have what it takes. They are just going to have to overcome. All right, so since this is the first episode of this season, it's going to be a bit of a longer episode. After the break here, we're going to talk about the Bucs and what the projections are going into 2025. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report podcast network. So glad you decided to join me today. Again, follow, subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Leave a 5-star rating, some comments, and tell your friends. Let's blow up this Bucs Report podcast. So in this extended episode here, can the defense be nasty again for the Bucs? Let's get into it. The biggest question heading into 2025, can the Buccaneers defense become a strength again? Because, what we saw last year, not great. We were 16th in points allowed, 18th in yards allowed. And that's one of the worst marks since 2019. Not exactly Todd Bowles' proudest moment, but here's the thing. The Bucs are still just trying to thrive and get better. They went out and got Haason Reddick, former Pro Bowler, still just 30 years old. You line him up with Yaya Diaby, and that pass rush might finally have some teeth again. Also, the rookie cornerback, Benjamin Morrison. Dude is everywhere in camp, fast, physical, eyes on the ball. Pair him up with Antoine Winfield Jr., who might be the most underrated safety in the league. There is no doubt that unit's got bounce back potential. Even Ted Nagain over at the Athletic, film guy, smart dude, he's listing the Bucs as one of the 5 defenses ready to break out. So definitely some work last season, and hopefully they have rectified that going into this season. That that this can be the season, like I said, that they battle and that they try to win that 5th straight NFC South title. I really think they could make it interesting here. But the question is this a top 10 defense again? Do they have the dogs to carry us to the playoffs, or is it just another year of almost? And one of the things I'll say about the Bucs is never count them out. There's been times where it seems like, they're down, but they're never down and out. And Todd Bowles, love him or hate him, he is a guy that gets the most out of his players. We could go into the weeds saying that he's not so good with clock management, the ability to want to go for it in key moments, those kind of things. But, his resume and the back of his coaching football card speaks volumes. So next, let's pivot and talk about the best wide receiver room in football. Yeah, you heard it. That is what some people are saying about the Bucs in 2025. Let's talk about something that feels, I'm going to say, a bit more fun here, because I've talked about injuries. I've talked about Wirfs. I've talked about Mayfield. Let's end on a bit of a higher note. This wide receiver room, is stacked. Evans, we know the deal. 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Dude's chasing Jerry Rice's record, which That's GOAT territory, if you will. And right behind him, I'm talking about a guy with the leading in league in receptions, touchdowns before that awful week 7 injury, Chris Godwin. And, you take a look at it. Evans, Godwin, both just amazing wide receivers in their own right. And if that was just the case, it would be good, but it gets better. And then listen to this, Jalen McMillan, who's turning heads as his 3rd round steal. And boom, you add Emeka Egbuka, 1st round pick, making plays in camp like he's been here for 5 years. Let's get hyped, Bucs fans. This is going to be the season that at a bare minimum, they win the NFC South. But I have more dreams of grandeur, if you will. You've also got 3rd-year quarterback in Baker Mayfield, who's got 4 legit options, plus Cade Otton at the tight end. And here's the thing, and maybe this is bold, but is this right here, is this the best wide receiver room in the NFL? Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or at BucsMinicast. I want to hear from you. I believe it is. Now, there are some good teams out there, but I think that the Bucs have done some of the right things to really make this team that much better. And like I said, this is the first episode. I'm just going to keep rolling. Generally going to be a 30-minute podcast, but it's been a while since I hosted one of these shows. So let's talk about Bucky Irving. Let's get hyped. So I talked about defense. We've talked about receivers. Now let's talk more surprising development from last season, and that is Bucky Irving, y'all. 4th round pick, only 3 starts, but 1,128 rushing yards, over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. That is the definition of insane. His week 12 performances, 152 yards and a touchdown. That was his hello world moment. And now he enters 2025 as RB1 in the backfield that is deep. And I think right out of the gate, we're not going to have to just, guess, is it going to be Rachaad White, and what are we going to see? And what's the book on Rachaad White? Is he lacked those bursts, those aggressive jigs, to break through that Bucky has? When Bucky's out there, he is serious about running that ball. You've got Rachaad White, still solid. Again, not casting shade, still useful. Sean Tucker, bruiser with a sneaky burst. DJ Williams lurking for snaps. And according to Pro Football Focus, the Bucs RB room is now the 6th best in the NFL. Oh yeah, brother, this team is going to be one to be reckoned with. Bucky earned tremendous grades in fantasy. If you are into fantasy sports as well, if you could put Bucky Irving in your mix, that could be huge. He had over 46 of goal-to-go snaps, and he's bulking up for a bigger role this year. That is the book on Bucky as well. I heard this from Stroud on his podcast, is that Bucky is absolutely jacked this year, and I think is going to just take this team to the next level. So when we take a look at it here, I think the Buccaneers, I always say surprise, but at this point, should we be surprised? I don't think that we should be surprised based on how well that this team has played. So let's just talk about, to close out here, just to kind of come full circle and talk about the questions, who's out. Baker Mayfield, questionable. Michael Pratt, out. Chris Godwin, out. Trey Palmer, questionable. Cade Otton, questionable. Tristan Wirfs, out. You take a look at it there. Desmond Watson out. Anthony Walker out. David Walker, injured reserve. Levante David, questionable. Trey Palmer, questionable. And Cameron Johnson, questionable as well. So, you take a look at the team as is. I think that, it looks pretty good. And, having Wirfs not in the fold is not ideal. I get that. But it's all a part of the game. You're playing a full contact sport here. That is just kind of how the way things go. I think the Buccaneers, despite that injury, still are in a good position to do some truly great things. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, your go-to podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, follow, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Give it a 5-star rating. Leave some comments. Tell your friends. Subscribe on YouTube. Let's blow that up. Let's get that over 1,000 subs. This is going to be a fun season, and it's going to be a fun season because of the Bucs Report podcast. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again next time.